We might be live. Hi, we are live. Welcome to Inside Scoop with Sue. And today's a big day. It's so exciting. First of all, the topic is so much fun. We're going to talk about puberty, and these two women are so fantastic. Cara Natterson, Dr. Cara Natterson, has been in my world for a while, and we've been so grateful to have the relationship with you. Cara is a pediatrician, New York Times bestselling author, co-founder and CEO of UMLA, relatively new company designed to make puberty more comfortable, literally. And we've tested it at your teen, and the response is fantastic. You guys should check it out. And co-host of the Puberty Podcast. Cara's puberty books, including the Care and Keeping of You series, are read by millions. So thanks for being here, Cara. And now we get to add to our Your Teen family with Vanessa Kroll Bennett. She's the host of the Puberty Podcast, the founder of Dynamo Girl, a company using sports and puberty education to empower kids, and the author of the Uncertain Parenting newsletter, Musings on Raising Adolescents. Vanessa, welcome. Welcome to Your Teen.
Yay. Thank you for having us. This is so fun.
So much fun. So first of all, anyone listening, if you've got questions, put them in the chat. We will get to them. And we're going to talk about puberty. So I just want to say there's so much out there on puberty. I mean, it gets talked about all the time. There's a million books about it. And yet when you become the mother of a kid going through puberty, it's like you've never heard the word before. Why is that?
Cara, Vanessa, go and tell us why puberty should have been a 4-letter word.
So I think that because adolescence is such an intense, complicated, fraught time for human beings, that by the time we get to be adults, we don't really want to go back there. And a lot of us are carrying what we like to call the baggage of our own puberty experience into our adulthood and haven't really figured out how to put that baggage down. And so when we need to talk to our kids about puberty, we're weighed down by our own experiences. And I think a lot of us weren't taught about puberty ourselves. We don't have the vocabulary, we don't have the language, and we don't want to mess it up. People are so worried that they're going to mess it up that they'd almost rather not talk about it at all than make a mistake. So we are here to tell everyone, you will mess it up, and that's totally fine. We mess it up, and it's our job to talk about puberty. And secondly, it's really our job, in order to keep our kids healthy and safe, to talk about this stuff, even if it's awkward, even if it's uncomfortable, even if we're not sure we're giving them the right answer. We should just go ahead and give it a shot.
And let me just add that our brain registers trauma and remembers trauma far longer than it remembers most other experiences or feelings. And there is always some traumatic experience during puberty, whether it's related to the shifts in your body or the shifts in your feelings or the shifts in your friends. And so that is why when Vanessa and I first met years ago, what we bonded over first was this concept of everyone wanting to talk through their puberty, because their puberty moment is that trauma moment, and that trauma moment is seared in their brains. And I think parents are desperate to save their kids from the trauma, but it's really hard to have a massive transformation that lasts almost a decade and not have some little bit of trauma along the way. So that's what we're here for, is to help you anticipate it and to help you troubleshoot it.
Okay, love everything you both said. I feel like it's transformative to hear that. I also think all the time that if we have the information, can we avoid the trauma for our kids? And so maybe can we help? I mean, so much of us in adult lives talk about an experience and say that was so middle school, right? Like it is traumatizing. So is it necessary? I mean, is there a way around that?
I don't know that we want to save everyone from growth experiences, and traumatic experiences do tend to be growth experiences. What we'd like to save our children from is the negativity around it, but we don't want them to lose the growth aspect. Susan, I don't think there's a way to insulate a kid from negative feelings or negative experiences when they might break out head to toe, or their body goes from being straight to being curvy, or their body doesn't change when everyone else's bodies are changing. There are so many pieces to this that are loaded, and loaded not by you as a parent, but by the world around you. So I don't know that we can or even want to save our kids. I think what we want to do is help rewrite the path of their experience through it. And what Vanessa and I hammer home in every single podcast is, so just talk about it. Just have the conversation.
And I think also a lot of the trauma that happens for people is not knowing, right? That changes in their bodies, experiences they have come as a surprise, right? The first period was a surprise. The first erection was a surprise. But if we can talk to our kids and kind of lay the groundwork for them to know it's normal, there's no shame in it, it's actually a natural part of their body changing, then it's less worrying. We interviewed a wonderful woman who specializes in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And what she said, her name is Terry Backout. And what she said is, adolescents feel things stronger than the people younger than they are and the people older than they are. And that's not something we can avoid. It's neurological. But we can do is give them as much information walking into that moment of big feelings in order to feel prepared and at least alleviate some of the shame and the worry. Because all adolescents do is worry all the time. Is this normal? Am I normal? And what we need to normalize is that there is no one normal. There are many, many normals in this process.
I love Sex Education, the TV series, and I think that is so helpful also. But what I want to say to everyone listening is share this with your people, because I think this will transform the way we engage with our kids as they enter at puberty in particular. So, I already feel like let's just end it right now because it's transformative. But we've got a lot more questions, so let's keep going. So what's the range? I know it's gotten much younger, but what's the range that girls in particular are starting to go through puberty?
Yeah, so when we all on this Zoom were going through puberty, the average age to have your entry point, which we can talk about what that looks like, but the average age was around 11 for girls and was around 11 and a half for boys. Today, the average girl enters puberty sometime between 8 and 9, depending upon her ethnicity, and the average boy between 9 and 10. Now that's average. So remember, many are later, and that can be normal. There's a very wide range, but we are now looking at a span of puberty that runs from, I would say, from 8 to 18, which is not how it looked when I was growing up.
So is it more embarrassing, challenging to be the first or to be the last? Like, and is everyone just having a hard time?
Can I tell you, my mantra around this is, it's really hard to be the first. And it's really hard to be the last. And it's really hard to be in the middle. I don't think it's a competition.
I mean, I think so. My brother created the show Big Mouth, which is all about a friendship between two kids, one who's a very early bloomer and one who is a late bloomer. And there's enough trauma and baggage for the two creators of the show to make an entire 6-season animated series about that. And so I do think, as Cara says, I think it's really hard to be the first, and it's typically the girls who are the first, and it's really hard to be the last, and it's typically boys who are the last. And the impact is not only on, what they look like physically, but it impacts sports, it impacts socializing and friendship, it impacts all different kinds of things. And so it can also depend on the community where you live and what that community values. So if you're in a community where boys are meant to be athletes and only athletes, being a late bloomer is really, really tough. If you're in a community that sexualizes girls who look like they're 14 but are 10, that's really, really tough. So I think it's a little bit subjective. But again, talking about it, having conversations about it, having your kid go through puberty really early or really late and not talking about it makes it even harder for our kids. So we need to be in conversation about this.
Well, any silence makes shame grow. So that's why I love what you said. Just talk. Even, I mean, we're going to get it wrong. We all get it wrong. Just talk. Putting words to it, right? Like it just makes such a difference.
We have an entire episode that just launched about how Vanessa and I get it wrong all the time. And it's literally our parent fails one after another, and we are laughing because if you don't laugh, you cry, but you can take a do it.
Okay, so the Puberty Podcast, check it out. So I want to get into a little bit of the details of what it's like to go through puberty. So, I mean, this comes up all the time with parents reaching out to us. The smells, and what I want to say is there's so many scenarios that go with that. So sometimes I can't be in the same room with my kid, and they just don't care. And anything that you suggest is like, I don't mind my own smell, so leave me alone.
Hygiene is one of the biggest topics we get early on, right? Because that's often one of the first things that parents notice is body odor and foot odor in their tween kids. And there's a conundrum, right? Because on the one hand, we don't want our kids to smell because we know what happens when they go to school and they smell, right? People are going to make fun of them. They're going to say unkind things. And frankly, it's just unpleasant. But on the other hand, we don't want to shame our kids. We don't want to make them feel bad because our whole point is to love and support our kids and make them feel good about themselves. So we get the question all the time. My kid comes home smelling like onions. What do I say? What do I do without traumatizing them? And maybe they don't care, right? So that comes up with acne, that comes up with body odor and foot odor, that comes up with all different kinds of stuff. So one of the things we like to talk about is leading with curiosity and noticing rather than leading with judgment. So doesn't sound like this. Hey, Cara, you stink. You're disgusting. Get in the shower or you're not getting dinner, right? That's not what it sounds like. Although,
first of all, it's so laughable, but we probably have all said it.
100%. But it might sound like, hey, Cara, I'm noticing that you're smelling differently and strongly. And I want to know kind of how you're taking care of your body in the mornings and at night when you get home from school. Right? That's like a kind of a less aggressive way of bringing up the topic of the onions.
And it really helps to explain the biology of smell because it's not their fault. And I'll just give a couple of quick pointers about this. The first is that the reason why we smell is that, and go with me here, when your body produces sweat, the sweat has proteins. The bacteria that live on our skin, normal, eat the proteins, and it's the byproduct, the off-gassing of what happens after the bacteria eat the proteins that causes that odor. So if your kids understand this, and they understand that they're sweating more, especially armpits and feet, right? Because those are areas that are enclosed and get hot. And they understand that a shower with soap makes a huge difference because the soap washes the bacteria off, not just standing there like this, right? So if they understand that, then they understand how to solve the problem. So take a shower, use soap, and then, some parents want to talk about when to use antiperspirants and deodorants, and we get into those details too.
So I guess this question is going to go to all the questions, which is, there's a social pressure when you're in middle school. And do we let kids? I mean, I think one of the reasons that we're so hard on our kids is we're afraid that they're going to be teased and bullied because they smell. But is there any benefit to letting the social order of things work it out for our kids and not make us the enforcer of their personal hygiene?
Well, I mean, for sure, we are not the social enforcers of everything in their life, nor should we be. That's called being a snowplow parent, where you try to clear the path for your kid, and everyone knows that ends poorly. So, at a certain level, that does apply to hygiene in much the same way that it applies to anything else that's happening socially or emotionally. However, Our kids trust us to have their backs and be honest with them. And what I usually say to my kids as I'm trying to introduce a topic that's awkward is, I'm the only one who's going to say this to you, myself and your dad, because I'm the only one who can. Don't get mad at me. I'm just being totally straight with you. No one else is going to tell you you smell, or, when you pick your nose, everyone can see, or, you fill in the blank. And their initial reaction can feel strong and negative. But if you establish yourself as the honest person in their life, and the people who live under their roof, the people who are in charge of raising them, need to be the honest people in their life. And you can do it without judgment. As Vanessa said, that's critical. But at least you're saying, this is what other people are seeing or smelling. And they're not going to tell you because it's rude. It's not kind of them to tell you. So I'm going to tell you because I love you, but it doesn't change how much I love you. And I also have solutions.
I also think if you're raising a child with other siblings in the home, sometimes that's actually a good way to get at it. So when I said to my middle school daughter, hey, you got to brush your teeth every morning, like you're at the age where your breath smells, she didn't listen to me. But when her 16-year-old brother said to her, you got to brush your teeth every morning, she immediately started brushing her teeth every morning. If you're raising a child and it's the only child living in that home, camp counselors, cousins, family friends who are closer to their age are great places to go to to convince your kid about things when maybe they're not actually listening to you. Because as our neuropsychologist friends like to say, we don't light up our kids' limbic systems, but their peers and other adolescents do. And that's a really valuable thing when you're trying to get information across to them.
Okay, that's fantastic. I'm going to let some of our friends have their voice here for a second. So Stephanie, hi, Stephanie. She has a son who's in a school that is diverse in every aspect, from band, sports, gender preferences, minorities. So that she's lucky. That's really a gift. Mm-hmm. And then let's see. This is also Stephanie. Mm-hmm. Her 16-year-old, son will be 16 this Monday and now wants to wear cologne and cares about his hygiene. But during the pandemic, he was zoomed and depressed and never wanted to shower. He was 14. Yeah.
So can I throw out to Stephanie, it's a really great moment to remind your son that cologne does not cover up body odor very effectively. So I always say you can go both routes, but I would not go one route. Don't transfer your soap needs onto cologne. And I'm seeing a yes, ma'am, and that's hilarious. And we've all lived that one, I think.
But here's what I love about what Stephanie said. When our kids take interest in how they look and how they smell and how they dress, and they use that as a kind of a self-expression, that's a great sign, even if they're doing it in a way that we wouldn't necessarily choose, right? Even if the clothes aren't our style, or we don't like the smell of the cologne, or they're doing stuff to their hair that we're like, what is going on? We should appreciate the identity expression and the self-expression, because that means they're taking pride in who they are, and that's a reflection of good stuff going on, even if it's not to our taste.
I will say, on a personal note, just last weekend, my son came home, he's 16, and I passed him, like literally was walking past him in the hallway of the house, and I got a very strong whiff of very potent cologne. And I just did a double take, and I said to him, wow, so I see that you're interested in cologne now. Would you like to know how much you should use at a time? We had a good laugh, and then he washed half of it off.
I have a new thing. One of my teenagers told me you put deodorant on your neck, and it brings the scent of the deodorant, kind of like cologne, to your so that more people can smell it, which I found fascinating.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll have to do a sidebar on that.
Okay, I got it from TikTok. I'm sure he got it from TikTok.
Hi, Deborah. We're going to share your comment. Cara, she loved that you added, make sure to use the soap and shampoo too, that it makes a difference.
Oh, yeah, shampoo.
Thanks, Deborah. Okay, let's get back to our questions. Hair, which Stephanie brought up also, by the way, in the comments. So for girls, like, you hear both sides of the story in terms of the mom's reaction. One is that the mom is pushing the removal of hair, and the other is you're too young. So what do you think the parent's role is this?
So I think the first thing is to start with no assumptions, because Gen Z's relationship to body hair is completely different than our relationship to body hair. You have everything from no hair anywhere is the desired outcome. You have other people who have full armpit hair and no pubic hair. You have, all sorts of facial hair. So we cannot start from where we were growing up. We have to start with no assumption. The second thing is we need to elicit the conversation rather than take a top-down approach. And that's basically our philosophy on any complex conversation with our teens. Find out from them where they are if we want to start the conversation, rather than saying, here's what's going to happen. I was once getting my armpits waxed, and there was a girl in the stall next to me screaming and crying because her mother was forcing her to get her armpits waxed before a bat mitzvah. So, our kids need to be partners in this. And frankly, we need their consent, and they need our consent if we're going to start making decisions about hair removal.
And hair, the sort of rituals around hair are very cultural.
Right.
Very. And as Vanessa described, the culture is shifting. So there's that piece, but there's also sort of cultural heritage in what is or is not accepted and sort of anticipated given different backgrounds. So I think it's so critical to have conversations around hair where if a child is asking for hair removal, talk about it. Don't shut that conversation down. And if you're comfortable with hair removal, there are lots of strategies, there are lots of ways to do it, but you want to teach your child how to do it safely. So if your child's going to use a razor, then you want to make sure your kid knows how to look for rust on a razor, for instance, right? So there are lots of pieces to this equation. And if you shut down the conversation, you may end up having a kid who's removing their hair with or without you. They don't really care. And then you've shut yourself out of that.
And the hair removal can be the conversation, or the desire to remove hair can be about a larger issue going on for their kid. Maybe they're feeling ostracized or not attractive or different in some way, and they're feeling like removing hair or doing something with their hair is going to, quote, solve that. And so sometimes it's a sign to us that there's something more going on, and the more we can open the door to that conversation, the easier it is for us to get to, if there are underlying things going on, to get to that place.
I feel like everything is being looked at as an opportunity through your lens, and as parents, we don't see it that way. We don't pull back and think about the opportunity of the moment. So it's really wonderful to kind of be reminded, and you never can kind of be reminded too often, that look at it as an opportunity instead of getting your back up quickly, right? Like there's something to be gained here. So that, I love that approach. And I need to be reminded of that all the time, even with adult children. Okay, so I want to make sure that we're boy girl here. So I'm going to move to the one that we never talk about, which is masturbation. So just talk about, like, when would you start seeing that if you have a boy? How do we stop leaving girls out of this conversation? And just generally, why is that like something that we just really never, ever bring up?
So I'll start with the biology of masturbation, and then Vanessa, maybe you can jump in from there. I used to take care of babies in the office who, when they would discover their penis or their labia and clitoris, they would not masturbate in the way that you're asking, but they would touch because there is tremendous sensation there. The concentration of nerve endings on the penis and on the clitoris is tremendous. And so it feels good to touch it. I actually had one, when I was in my training, I had one neurologist who used to show a video of a toddler who would go into the living room and essentially masturbate. And the parents brought the child into the neurologist because they thought the child was having seizures. And the neurologist said, no, that's not seizures. This is totally and utterly normal and human, and it's masturbation. So masturbation is just self-pleasure, and it starts extremely young. But the way in which I think you're asking it is sort of the masturbation that tends to really start to appear around puberty. And Vanessa, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately our goal for all of our children is for them to grow up and have loving, meaningful, pleasurable relationships, romantic relationships. And part of that could be pleasurable sexual relationships. And in order for them to understand what feels good, and for them to be able to communicate that to a partner, is to experiment on their own bodies and to understand their own bodies. And I think that, our society is really, I think boys' masturbation has been normalized a lot more. It's talked about a lot more. I think our society is really afraid of female sexuality. They're afraid of, girls starting too young, even though we sexualize girls so young. And so there is a bit of a gender imbalance. But I think for all kids, it's important for them to know it's normal, that it feels good, that it's great to be able to communicate it when they get older and have partners, but that there are times and places where it's appropriate, and there are times and places where it's not appropriate. So if your 11-year-old son is on the couch watching TV with you and has his hands down his pants, you could probably say, hey, dude, you know what? That's actually for your bedroom or your bathroom. We're not going to do that while we're all hanging out. It's totally fine if you do it. I know that feels great, no problem, but we're not going to do that in the family setting. So there are ways to create appropriate boundaries without creating shame. And it's kind of amazing that there are parts of our bodies that feel really good. And I don't think we should take that away from our kids. We just have to help them understand it in a clear way.
Okay. We're going to have to get back on and do another time because I have so many more questions for you and we're running out of time. But I'm going to give you the last question, which is, you did a podcast on the myths of puberty. So tell us right now, what are the things you want parents to know that we're walking around with, these false beliefs?
Okay, I've got one. And I was going to bring it up when you mentioned body odor and hair. So as crazy as this sounds, body odor and hair are actually not signs of puberty. And so what is happening when kids sprout more hair or when they start to smell is that the hormones that are released from their adrenal glands that sit on top of their kidneys, those hormones are triggering that type of development. And they are called the adrenal androgens, and they are cousins of testosterone. So that is why some kids will develop pubic hair very early, or they'll have smells very early, and they'll go to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician will say, this is not puberty.
And my myth, and Cara wrote a whole book about this called Decoding Boys, is that the myth is that boys don't feel things strongly, that boys don't have sensitivities and hard emotions and pain and heartbreak. Our boys and our girls, our kids of all gender, feel things strongly. They're just going to express it differently. And so we need to make room for the fact that all kids feel a lot of complicated things, and they just may choose to share it or not share it, but they all feel it.
Okay. Whoa, that was a lot and not nearly enough. But Dr. Cara Natterson, thank you so much. Vanessa Kroll Bennett, thank you so much. And check out Cara's website, Umla. Tell us what it is so we can put it down there.
myumla.com.
And then check out their podcast, the Puberty Podcast. And wow, thank you so much for this morning. Really great information.
Thank you, Susan.
You.